Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to be looking at how remittance providers can unlock more value from every transaction, not by changing the basics of remittance itself, but by looking at what kind of happens around the transaction. So this is going to be a very practical session. We'll be sharing some examples, talking through real situations, and then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. So do feel free to leave your questions on the chat or the Q&A tab throughout the session, and we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of the session. I've just seen somebody has raised their hand. I'm just going to navigate to the chat to see if everything's okay. Yusuf, can you hear me okay? Sama, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you, Natalie, loud and clear.
Okay, brilliant. We'll just carry on then. Okay. So just quickly on introductions, I'm Natalie from the Remit1 team, and I'm joined today with my colleague Osama Kasabati, Head of Business Solutions. So Osama works closely with money transfer operators and banks across different markets, helping them to think through how to get more from their existing setups. So I'll be setting the context for the session, and then Osama will walk us through some of the practical examples. So before we get into the solutions, it's just worth taking a step back. So sending money is now expected. Most providers can move money quickly and at a similar price. So from a customer point of view, a lot of services can feel very similar. And when that happens, people easily switch providers, and that can put pressure on margins and on loyalty. So the real question is, where else can, the value be added? So if send and receive is just expected, then the value comes from everything around it. How easy is it to fund a transfer? How reliable payout is? And what you can enable for customers beyond the send itself. So those moments can shape revenue, costs, and whether customers come back. And that's kind of the lens we'll use for the rest of the session today. Now, this is just a simple journey that we'll also be using today. Every transaction follows the same path. So there's the send side, there's processing, and then there's payout. And at each stage, there are opportunities to add value. So you don't need to do everything. It's about choosing what matters most in terms of, finding where you can add value, whether it's on the send, processing, or on payout. So yeah, Osama, let's just get started then on some of these practical capabilities. So on the send side, when you look at send side, where do you typically see friction starting for customers when they fund a transfer? And how does open banking help kind of address that?
Thank you very much, Natalie, for that kind introduction. Yeah, so one way to add value is right at the beginning of the transaction cycle. When the sender is funding for a transaction, paying for a transaction, or a remittance that they've made. The typical way a lot of MTOs are doing this at the moment, if they're digital, app-based, website-based, is through a payment gateway. I would say not a new way of collecting those funds, but I think I definitely would say that the remittance industry has been a little bit slow of adopting this payment method, which is open banking. Open banking has quite a few benefits. I mean, the first one is it's a more, it's a, well, I'd say it's a less of a it's a frictionless process. So
Yeah.
essentially the remitter doesn't have to go out of the app, fumble around for their debit or credit card, punch in their numbers and then their security code for that transaction to be processed. So through open banking, there's a few steps involved. Only you don't even have to come out of the app itself. Essentially, it's more of a redirect, and it debits the funds directly from their bank account. So it's much more of a faster process as well. And you get quicker confirmation. It's very secure. So you get faster confirmation. There's fewer steps involved, so there's less friction. And obviously the other, I would say, main advantage of using an open banking provider. It could be much more cost effective in comparison to using your typical payment gateways as well. And
Yeah.
what you do with those savings is down, it's up to you. Do you then pass those savings on to the client so they can have a lower transactional fee, and then that they're more likely to be a reoccurring customer and use your services because of those low fees? Or again, you can increase your profits by paying less for those services to collect those funds.
Yeah. So basically fewer steps, faster confirmation, reduced drop-offs, and also, yeah, the big point, which is the cost efficiency of it all. Yeah, it is really interesting how just a small change at the start of the journey can actually have quite a big impact on both the experience for the customer and the cost side of it too. Yeah, thank you for that, Osama. Um, so kind of moving on from the first stage of the transaction flow, when funds kind of have been sent and received, how useful are they really to recipients today? And kind of where do prepaid cards change that experience?
So let's look at the typical remittance at the moment. It's going to be either your bank transfer. A lot of the times, we're talking about receiving countries where the diaspora can't obtain a bank account. So that is a way limiting your payout networks or how people can use those funds that want to be sent. The other typical ways are a cash pickup, right, where you're sending uh, to one of your typical brick and mortar remittance companies where then the recipient is going collecting cash from there. Again, that sort of limits what they can do with that cash. Yes, they can go to stores, but they can't shop online for anything, or they can't subscribe for anything. Um, so the other way would be your e-wallet. So you're funding someone's e-wallet, and then they're going spending that money in the money's in the e-wallet. And again, that does depend on, do the other people or the other vendors or the product providers, do they subscribe to that same wallet, or do they have a wallet for you to pay into? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So again, if they're not part of the same network, it makes it very difficult. You're unable to make that payment. What the top up card does essentially is that the sender is able to set a certain amount on a card. So we'll top up that card, send that to the beneficiary. Then the beneficiary can do things like online shopping. They can pay for subscriptions, like for things like Netflix. And so it really expands the options they have and on how they spend their money.
Yeah. And do you think this changes, how often customers will come back or stay with a provider?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this will be a theme running right the way through with these super apps. And if you look at some of the larger players out there, they are starting to not to adopt these multiple types of payment methods and other services as well, because essentially what it's doing is it's keeping everything in one space. So when when someone is doing a remittance, if they then want to, buy a top-up card rather than going to another third party, they can do it within the same, under the same umbrella with the same client. So that again, there's rarely loyalty in this. That might cause them to look at someone else because they do top-up card, and they might start using them for remittances as well. So it's all about keeping customer retention, repeat customers by offering them as many services as possible.
Yeah, and the usability, like that great example of paying for a Netflix subscription, maybe something they
Absolutely.
weren't able to do before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that idea of usability, I think it's really important. Okay, and then kind of looking beyond the payment itself. So, Osama, how important is it for providers to stay relevant, between the transactions? And why do you think services like travel eSIMs matter, in that context?
Yeah. So when we're thinking about cross-border payments, I think cross-border travel kind of goes hand in hand with that. Um, with the ability to offer eSIMs, yeah, along with remittance transactions and other types of cross-border transactions. you're kind of starting to build these super apps. And this is what I mentioned earlier about some of the larger players out there that you'll notice they are starting to also do eSIM products, which means if you like to compete, and there's a reason for them doing that, obviously. I mean, I think cross-border payments, cross-border traveling, a lot of the times, I mean, it's not just for the beneficiary; the remitter themselves can, can generate eSIM for themselves when they're traveling, right? And again, it's about keeping everyone in one area. It's convenience of use, yeah, and it shows, it's diversifying your sort of portfolio rather than keeping all your eggs in one basket. You have multiple different channels of income as well, like that. Yeah. Not only that, but it helps with retention, client retention, and reoccurring clients as well.
Yeah, so it's essentially another revenue stream that remittance providers can take advantage of. And it feels very relevant, doesn't it, with the travel eSIM, with the types of clients that we have. It's just like a very practical way to stay connected with customers between transactions.
Absolutely. I mean, I
Uh,
don't,
yeah,
everybody's, I think, has been, subject to high roaming costs where they might have been on holiday and they, all of a sudden they come home with this high phone bills because their particular carrier doesn't have connections in those areas. So yeah, this
yeah,
kind of solves that problem.
yeah. And with the likes of like, Western Union have rolled this out. It's that competitiveness, isn't it, as well, that angle too. Keeping those customers loyal. Okay, and then finally turning to like the last leg of the journey, which is payout. Um, what do you think typically happens when payout options or reliability don't meet customer expectations? And why is this such a critical part of the journey?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying when we're talking about remittance and money and trust is paramount. Right? It's not like we're buying a goods or services or anything like that. With money, people are very, very particular where they spend their money. Some of the time in remittance industry, people don't mind paying that little bit more if they trust that
Mm.
particular MTO. It might be from their background or from their diaspora. Um, when if you do get a failed transaction, obviously it leaves a very bad taste in the remitter's mouth. They're more than likely to then go somewhere else straight away. Yeah, and then you've lost that customer. They're highly unlikely to come back. So it's quite important. It can be devastating to to a business if they're unable to show trust and continuous delivery of transactions in a safe, secure manner. Now, your partner, a good payout partner, not only should be able to provide you secure, fast, easy transactions. Um, a lot of them could help you expand your network, not just in the places that that you're paying out in. Say, for example, you have quite a good payout network already in Pakistan and India. You'd like to go then on to Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. You could finding a good partner. Yeah, some of the time that partner has multiple payout corridors as well, which again makes it very easy for you. So rather than pre-funding multiple partners, finding a good partner, that's providing safe, secure transactions to might be multiple corridors helps you then increase your payout network and hopefully increase your transactions and are going to increase your revenue. And a good partner, not only would they have a good network, but they'll have, as we spoke about before, not just on the receive side, but on the send side, different methods of paying out. So at the moment, you might be, very well handling bank transfers and your typical cash collection. However, as we go along, e-wallets are becoming more prevalent, and it's something that you want to add to your payout transactions that are available for your clients. One of your good payout partner will also help you grow in that sense. So not only have a wide a payout network, but also have different types of transactions available for you.
Yeah. And how do you think this kind of plays out in terms of the competitiveness against like larger players um, when you implement like a strong payout partner?
Yeah, I mean, it allows you then to diversify again your portfolio, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You're growing your super app, so to speak, which helps you then compete with. And I think that that's a general direction a lot of the larger players are going, having these many forms of services within one app, many with many types of payout locations. For example, they might do utility bill, card top up, mobile top ups, wallet payments, all under one app, and do them to a wide variety of countries, and that's obviously gonna help you build your brand.
Yeah, so it's about the global reach, the choice, the consistency, and most importantly, like the trust and the confidence in them as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think it really shows how, payout is where trust is either kind of built or lost. So I think what's important here is that, the out of all of the capabilities that we've talked about, none of these things sort of sit in isolation. They all strengthen this same journey from like funding to payout to what customers sort of experience in between. And then delivered together, this becomes one kind of coherent journey. So we've talked some about, several different capabilities. How do providers actually do, bring this all together without adding complexity to their operations?
Yeah, what is key to any cross-border payments provider, remittance company or bank that is in particularly cross-border payments? What's the backbone of the business is the technology. Uh, and having a good technology provider means that they would have thought about and they would have had to have a lot of these things available within the functionality of their system. A good technology provider, as an example, as Remit One, not only do they have the technology in place, but they should be able to facilitate those introductions. For example, let's just say you were interested in the open banking that we talked about earlier, so you can cut your costs and reduce friction when you're making payments. You could come to speak to Remit One. We have those, not just the technical capabilities in place, but we'll have the some of those partnerships and contacts in place so we can introduce you to the right person. You can have those conversations. You can start adding those different types of features and functionality to your portfolio. Um, with the, I mean, also I think this what is quite critical when we speak about multiple payout locations and growing your payout network is the compliance side. A good software provider not should only have a lot of connections or integrations already in place that they can offer to you and introduce you to those payout partners. Yeah, but should also have the remittance capabilities, compliance capabilities in place to be able to handle the mindful that is the compliance, particularly when we're talking about multiple region. Obviously, one area won't have exactly the same compliance rules as another area, right? And the payout partner will probably expect different things from you, and depending on the size or type of transaction, depending on the area, having a good uh, uh, you know, technology backbone, I would say, to manage that and to handle those compliance rules, I think is very crucial. Um, but yeah, it all boils down to the technology. I believe all the top MTOs out there, a lot of them are Remit Ones. It's because of their the technology that they have and offering multiple types of payment methods and whether it be e-wallet payments or utility bill payments or the ease of the transaction doing that through things like open banking, the payment methods or the payment rails that they have, and really growing that and showing that through technology. And I think they're the ones that you see really succeed and grow going forward.
Yeah. And the technology backbone allows these things to be rolled out in a simple fashion and in a faster way, right? So you can start generating revenue from these things sooner because, the complexity isn't there of having to set all these things up. Um, yeah. So it's reassuring really to hear that, adding in these other capabilities don't necessarily mean adding lots of layers of complexity. That's really good. Okay. So when you take a kind of step back and look at this as a whole, what does this actually mean for the business in terms of revenue, pricing, customer retention?
So if we look at the revenue side of it, when we look at things like the customer journey and reducing not just the friction but that particular collection fee by moving to an open banking provider, obviously that's going to reduce your costs. Now, what you do with those savings, do you pass it back to the client? It's up to you, or do you retain that as extra profit margin, rather than what you would have been paying to a typical a credit or debit card acquirer. And passing those savings on to the client, it's more likely that your transaction is going to be cheaper than some of the other players out there, and which means obviously that it's more likely that they're going to return and use your services. Extending your payout network, I mean, having all your eggs in one basket, as I mentioned earlier. If you've got one corridor, having multiple corridor makes it much more of a robust business structure, I think, rather than if you just have a single corridor. For whatever reason, let's just say it gets sanctioned tomorrow, as an example, and then there's nothing to fall back on. Same with the different payment methods, right? We're not just talking about doing your typical remittance. What comes hand in hand with that? Adding these extra services is obviously going to add extra revenue channels, extra revenue stream. We're talking about things like eSIMs, or it could be your card top ups, your prepaid cards for when people want to pay for things like for online or their Netflix subscription. So again, this is gonna add new revenue streams or new way of generating money for your business as well. And
Yeah,
this doesn't necessarily mean, if you do have the right partner in place, this doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be, it's going to be very difficult or it's going to be complex to switch these services on, or they require different types of licensing. Particularly with the eSIM, it's out of the eSIM and the top-up card. They're out of the remittance. I would say group, because it's looked at actually a commodity that you're selling, so there's no licenses required, right? So it will be very, very easy for you. You have a remittance provider, a remittance software provider that already has its integration, its functionality in place. You don't need a particular license to provide these services to your clients. It's a simple case of having a conversation. You would agree the pricing structure, and then someone like Remit One can turn it on like a switch, basically, very easily, and then you could start offering those services very quickly.
brilliant. Yeah, and I think that sums it up really well. Thank you, Osama, for going through that for us. So I think the key takeaway for me is choice. You don't need to do all of this at once. It's about identifying, where value is kind of leaking out of your transaction flow today, and then prioritizing the areas with the biggest revenue or the biggest retention kind of impact, and then introducing things in stages, kind of at your own pace. So we will move to the Q&A now from the audience. So as I wrap up, please do post your questions in the Q&A tab or in the chat, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. We've got about 5 minutes left of the session, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. And if today's session has raised any questions or ideas, or if you'd like to speak further about anything you've heard, then do book a consultation session with us. You can do so by scanning the QR code on the screen. During the consultation with Osama, there'll be a chance to look at your model and your priorities and just see what makes sense for you. We may recommend implementing something we've gone over today, or there might be other recommendations that we can suggest. So it's just definitely well worth the conversation. We'll also be sharing the booking instructions for that consultation via email after the session, so don't worry if you miss it just now. We'll also be continuing these conversations through our upcoming webinars and the IPR podcast. Our next webinar is going to be in March, and that's going to be about RAS, which is Remittance as a Service. This is a business model that many people are interested in, specifically banks interested in at the moment. So yeah, we'll be covering that topic in March. Is going to be quite different to what we've covered here today. So do join that if you can, and we'll also share the details to register for that in an email after this session. And check out the RPL podcast. We release an episode every month on a range of different topics covering AI, RAS, trends, lots of different topics on there. And we'd love to just get your feedback on what you think about that too. So check that out. We'll share the link again on an email, but you can also just search it on YouTube, and there is a full channel on there for that. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the presentation. We'd love to now open the floor to your questions. So just bear with me as I navigate to the Q&A tab and the chat to see what we've got here. Okay, so I'm just looking at the chat, Osama. How can we enable the open banking via WorldPay ? We already have a payment gateway connected. If there are other different providers you have already connected, let us know, and the service provider is already integrated as well. So we absolutely can provide
absolutely.
more info.
Yep, I can have that. I'll have that conversation with you, Tanishka. I don't believe WellPay offer open banking. They are either your typical payment gateway card, debit card, credit card, Apple Pay and Google Pay, I believe. For open banking, we have a partner called Get Volume. They operate UK, all over Europe, Canada as well. But I will definitely connect you to them, Tanushka, once we get off this call. So thank you very much for that. Sheila, Sheila's question is, how quickly can I activate these add-ons on my current system? Sheila, very quickly. I think it's a case of you letting us know which services are of interest to you. We would facilitate those, those introductions to those particular service providers. As soon as you have an agreement in place with them, you can come back to us, provide us with those credentials, and as I mentioned, it's a flick of a switch, maybe half a day, technically to switch it on, and there's no charge for that either. So come to us, let us know who you'd like to speak to. We facilitate those conversations. As soon as you're done with those conversations, it depends how quickly you go. Once they're done, we can move very quickly.
Another question, Osama, is there a strategy that has to be different between countries and continents? Some of these value adders are not established in zones of like Latin America or Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think things like open banking, they're not in Latin America as of yet. Um, not Africa either. I think open banking, as I mentioned before, mainly in UK, Europe, and Canada. US hasn't adopted it as yet, as far as I'm aware. The other ones, the other services, yeah, they can be provided from anywhere. So we're talking about the top up card, through our partners at Reloadly. You can have a conversation with them if you have that the contract agreement in place with them. Again, we could turn that facility on for you pretty quickly, and that you can do that from anywhere. Yeah? So you could be one of our clients based in like UBA based in Africa or Banco de Brazil. You can offer that service very simply. Yeah. Similarly with the eSIM Go, it's a commodity. You don't need to be licensed. It's you can provide that service from anywhere. Okay. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
We've got one more question here, which is more about stable coins, which is always an interesting topic that we love to talk about. They want to know specifically if a company wants to transition from traditional SWIFT correspondent banking to a stable coin-based flow, what would be your recommended roadmap regarding regulatory compliance and managing local off-ramps in emerging markets? Now, I think that could probably be its whole separate webinar, if not a
Um,
series of webinars.
no,
We are going to cover it in a minute, but yeah, do you want to say anything briefly about that, Osama?
no, as you mentioned, I think we have got a webinar coming up in I think the next 3 to 6 months, and it's going to be sort of focusing on crypto, a stable coin, and how people can use that to fund either your partners or for transactions themselves. So, yeah, and how can you be, how can what the regulatory requirements are around that. So that's definitely a long conversation for another day.
Yeah, but we do have some Remit One clients that are transacting in crypto.
Yes, we absolutely do. We
Yeah,
absolutely do.
and it is something that we can have a further conversation about if
Yeah,
it's of
yeah. I
interest.
mean,
Yeah,
if you guys want a direct conversation, and rather you don't have to wait for the webinar, obviously. If you want to know what we have in place and how we can, facilitate that for you, please feel free to reach out. We can take that offline and we can speak to you about some of our partners like BP Ventures, and I forget the name of the other two, um, that provide stablecoin facilities that we're connected to. So yeah,
yeah,
happy to do that as well.
yeah. So we'll be sharing the booking link after the call. So yeah, do book that meeting in with us, and we can definitely continue those conversations on that topic. We've got a few raised hands. Unfortunately, because of this webinar chat, we're not able to come to you directly. But if you drop your question in the chat, we can stay on for a bit longer and see if we can answer those for you. Just going to navigate back to the Q&A, see if there's any more. I think we've covered the main ones here. Okay. Doesn't look like there's any more coming in. But yeah, we'll be sharing, as mentioned, we'll be sharing the booking link to have a further conversation with us, to take any of these points offline with you. So do book a meeting with us following this session. We'll also be sharing the link for the next webinar and for the podcast. I'd love to get your feedback on that. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate your time on the session and all your really lovely questions. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks all.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Thanks very much. Bye bye, guys. Bye all.